it's 8 months, and all through this 8th month, everything you hear and outside here will be about the 8th step. It's in the daily reflections and everything. It could be the 8th tradition, but that's what'll be coming up this month right here. And so what does the 8th step read? It says, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing, that's the first key word, to make amends to them all. And all is the next key word. You gotta make amends to enemies as well as friends, you know, but it's important that you do that for yourself. I brought this book tonight because whether you and your sponsor are using it or not, it's got a lot of great information in it. I encourage you to read it, whether your sponsor does or not. And as a matter of fact, you might teach him something. But the thing about it is that this book was written about 16 years later than the big book. So Alcoholics Anonymous had grown and not matured at that stage, but they were growing and in understanding and whatever. So this book was written at that time, not by a group, but by an individual. Bill W. wrote it. A lot of people won't read it just because of that, but it's got a lot of good information in it. I'm just going to read the highlights of this, and then y'all can go back and read it later. And these are very important, you know. I'm going to read the first paragraph. Those steps 8 and 9, which is a pair, are concerned with personal relations. First, we took a look backward and tried to discover where we had been at fault. Next, we made a vigorous attempt to repair the damage we had done. And third, having thus cleaned away the debris of the past, we considered how, with our newfound knowledge of ourselves, we may develop the best possible relationship with every human being we know. And so I'm just going to read through some things that I thought were important when I read this. In the beginning, just at random, this is a very large order. It's a task which we may perform with increasing skill, but never really finish. To a degree, he has already, and I'm going to use we instead of he, to a degree, we have already done this when taking a moral inventory in the 4th step. But now it's time to come when we ought to redouble our efforts to see how many people we had harmed or hurt, whatever word you want to use. You're going to face obstacles in this step, and these are obstacles, and whether they're real or not, for a lot of them they are fancied. That's just a word that Bill W. used right there. The first and the most difficult thing or obstacle we have to deal with is forgiveness. And if you cannot have, or if you don't have forgiveness in your own heart, it's certainly hard to ask anybody else to forgive you, or you don't really understand forgiveness in general. So this is it. The moment we ponder a twisted or broken relationship with another person, our emotions go on the defense. To escape looking at the wrongs we have done others, we resentfully focus the wrong they had done us. Okay, next thing is, and here's another obstacle. We got a pretty severe shock when we realized that we were preparing to make a face-to-face admission of our wretched conduct to those we had harmed or hurt. Harm is the word to use here. There are cases too where we had damaged others who were still happily unaware that we had done it. So when you're going to make amends, are you going to tell them? And this is what most of us would say, is that, why should we worry about that? Why don't we let bygones be bygones? Why dig up this old stuff, you know? They don't know I stole that $100 from them, but don't worry about it. That's the kind of thinking that we go by. And some of us are tipped over by another snag, a different one. And this is, the words are really interesting here. We clung to the claim that when drinking, we never hurt anybody but ourselves. Okay? The attitude, of course, is the end result of purposeful forgetting. This is an attitude which can only be changed by a deep and honest search of our motives and actions. You know, in many instances, we shall find that though the harm done others has not been great, the emotional harm we have done ourselves the emotional harm we have done ourselves has really been harmful to us. Very deep, sometimes quite forgotten, damaging emotions. This is probably the first time you're going to hear anything about emotions in the 8th step. Our emotional conflict persists below the level of consciousness. And at times of these occurrences, they may not actually have given emotions violent twists, which have since discolored our personalities and altered our lives for the worse. You know, one thing we have to be careful of, or something we should always do, is that we extradite from an examination of our personal relations every bit of information about ourselves and our fundamental difficulties that we can. Since this is something I bet none of you may have ever thought about, this sentence dumbfounded me when I first heard it. Since defective relationships with other humans beings have nearly always been the immediate cause of our woes, including our alcoholism. Did you ever think this relationship had anything to do with your alcoholism? No field of investigation could yield more satisfying and valuable reward than this one. And next thing, we might ask ourselves, what do we mean when we've harmed other people? What kind of harms do people do one another anyway? To define the word harm in a practical way, we may call it as a result of instincts in collision, which cause physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual damage to people. And I'm about to the end of it. To put a finger on the nearby and most deeply damaging one shouldn't be too hard. Then, as year goes by, year after year goes by, something will come back to you. Say, oh yeah, I remember that when I harmed them too. So it's just a never-ending challenge to you to do this if you care. And so the last thing we'll read here is this is just the beginning of the end of isolation from our fellows and from God. And I made this note in here I got from somewhere else. I write books all the time. You should too. I mean, you don't have to, but you should. And this is what I wrote. Spirituality is linked to many important aspects of human functioning. Spiritual people have positive relationships, high self-esteem, are optimistic, and have meaning and purpose in their life. This is how one becomes a useful member of society. So that's it for that. Thank you.
Thank you.